All right, welcome to another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. My name is David Margolin. It's February 2nd, and a lot of interesting weather, I think, over the past couple of days, and we've got some good guests on the line here, I think, to talk about it in industry and research. And in particular, we've got Josh Herman here, first time, and I think he's got some really interesting methods. So we're gonna turn over to Josh here in just a second. And outside of that, our normal agenda is to go through past couple weeks, and there's some interesting things there, and then talk about the forecast in particular for the 16 and 20 day period. Outside of that, is there anything that folks want to try to cover today? I guess we had, big snowstorm in the Northeast. Maybe we have a few minutes for that. Any other topics that folks want to try to cover in the next 45 minutes or so? All right. If anything comes up, let me know. Yeah, Josh. So why don't we turn it over to you? And of course, I don't know you that well, and folks on the forecast contest don't. So maybe you could also just take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about your background and your interest in sort of the medium range forecast, and then yeah, we'd love to hear some of your some more about your methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to the meeting. I'm having a lot of fun with this contest. I enjoy learning about the others' forecasting methods, and everything's displayed right here, and it's fun to poke around and dig around. Yeah, my name is Josh Herman. I'm 44 years old, born and raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Currently reside in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. During the day, I'm a automation engineer at Piper Electric, and when I'm not working, I like to be active with my family. So that's, baseline there for me. About a decade ago, I met Scott Metzger. He was a leader in the research of recurring weather idea. His mentorship and collaboration, we began to quantify this recurring idea. This work led to creating what I call the recurring Rossby wave train model. And then after years of experimenting and research, Dr. Lupo and Joe Rankin, who are in this competition as well, we had a small little success with the rodeo forecast competition, which after I kind of went on sabbatical for a moment, kind of went away from the research. But because of this contest, resurrected it and joined this collaboration effort. And but as far as the model goes, it is based on finding recurring patterns in our upper atmosphere, middle of it. And when we find those connections, we take the days between these connections and use those to find analogs, and use those analogs to project the future weather. That's the short of it. And for this competition, I'm taking the model output and taking the heating degree days differential based on the forecast period and the average, and then manually entering my mean temperature to calculate the forecast heating degree days and the mean and the standard deviation requirements for this competition. But right, so I could technically share my screen to show what this model looks like.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Share. Which screen do I want to do this on? Share screen 3. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
I do have the outline on it, so it does show that I'm sharing.
Can anyone else see it?
I can't, but Dave, you might need to give him privilege to do that.
Thought I did.
Maybe I have to hit share.
Oh,
Well,
something's happening. There we go. There we go.
you're seeing my web page, my web browser?
I'm seeing
Yep.
the recurring Rossby wave train page.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. So you're seeing my browser.
Yep.
Okay, good. So this is a little web page I put together years ago to show our forecasts. So when a forecast comes up, it shows us these, these days, right? So in this competition, I use the 16 to 20 day for this period, and I take the output for the continental United States there and take the actual temperatures, convert them to heating degree days, right? And then enter that data in. But for figuring out what's happening, I have some charts that go back and, correlate the different patterns between 20 and 100 days previous. And when I find correlation in these patterns, I graph them out here. So we see the day, the pattern length, and then the correlation of those patterns going through the last past year. Let me get rid of this Teams thing here, and then I can scroll over. So connecting these patterns, granted, there's going to be some seasonal variation, because if I get a correlation for something in summer when we're going into fall, the jet stream's not quite in the correct position. And you can see where in our our seasonal transitions, where the correlations get lower. And when we're in the depths of summer, the depths of winter, you can see how the correlations stay quite high. So there is patterns that are recurring at a time scale of, a medium, of 30 to 60 days, not quite a whole long season, not quite 10 to 20 days. So I do this for around the globe at 45-degree parallel, and for these areas, correlate the patterns at the 500 millibar level, and it shows just the different reoccurring states. Take those numbers, come up with a oscillation period, the top 10 of them. I display what parts of the world it's highly connected, and then I just take these numbers. I take the 15-day mean, and then the 10-day, the top 10 average, and then I take it back to 720 days as well to find the seasonal connection, so I can bring in, some actual reality to it with a seasonal jet stream. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and that's just something that it's just off the top of my head here, kind of caught me off guard. It's been a while. But right, so all these connections, and then I'll also go into and show the actual patterns, the jet stream setup for these days, and what the weather actually transpired to be. And then from these patterns, that's where the 5-day mean comes from, and all that. But yeah, sorry for being so glib here.
No, this is Josh. We appreciate you sharing. I mean, it's in the spirit of the contest. I wonder, it might be helpful. Could you show us how you applied it to the current forecast?
Yes.
And maybe, talk around your confidence in terms of, because it sounds like, I'm just trying to understand this now, but there's correlations and stuff like that. So like, is it, Is it a situation where your process suggests high confidence, low confidence? Do you get that information from this process? But yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, yeah, I used to be able to put up for verification maps with, and connecting that to the forecast map and have verification metrics, but I haven't done that in quite a while. And there's confidence in it. It's difficult to quantify that at the moment. For me to show you right now, I don't really have those numbers. But for example, this, I can open up my Excel here. Are you seeing my Excel page?
Yes.
Excellent. So, well, I should show you the map too. Now I'm getting into it. Let me go to my drive. And then, so for example, the mean, so I'll take this map because I like to have fun with this. I'll take this map and I will look at the mean temperature. I will manually enter the mean temperature per state, just because I like to have fun. So based on that, where my Excel spreadsheet went, then I come over here and I type in the actual mean temperature. And from that, I create a F, and then based on the forecast period average HDDs and the recurring Raster wave train analog dates average HDDs, I then create a differential. From that, then I compare that with the average, and then that's how I come up with my numbers if it's above or below. It's quite rudimentary, very simple. And then at this point, I'm not sure what, if I would have like a plus or minus 2 on this value here, if I'm going to say average or not. But right now, I'm not saying average for anything. I'm just saying it's above or below. Yeah, so that's how I'm applying it. I can't remember where I got all these heating degree, and cooling degree day averages. I got it from someplace off of NOAA. I'd have to go back and look. And then, each week I just type in the same stuff, change some dates, and type in my temperatures that I think are legit. It's not all that scientific. I mean, I have to, I go in here and I just look at that, get the average and type it in.
So I guess like big picture though, like maybe zooming out one level up, like what do you see in today's forecast? Did you? I can't remember. Did you produce a forecast today?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So what was like your what's the big takeaway in terms of, I guess, like, does your process suggest normal, colder than normal, and and in particular, I guess, does it say something about the kind of pattern we're going to expect from, like, I don't know, like a deep trough in the east or a blocking pattern? Does it give you that kind of information?
Yes. Where's my latest? So this is yesterday's run. That is the 17th to 21st. This is the 5-day 500 millibar. It's suggesting something which the models are not, which is, perhaps some troughiness in the west and some ridging in the east. And if I was looking at the models correctly this morning, it seems after this little snowstorm that comes through Thursday and Friday in Wisconsin, it's going to usher in a bunch of Arctic air to us in the east. So in that long-term time frame there. But right, so this is the pattern overall that it's suggesting. And based on that, these are the anomalies of temperature. And then I zoom in a bit to the US, And then from this temperature mean, I then calculate the heating degree days. But for example, then in that 16 to 20 day window, I come over here and I look at the potential weather setup, potential patterns here. And as you can see, it's troughy out west, maybe some eastern trough, but most of this time frame, it suggests on average that the HDDs over in the east are going to be below average.
Okay, can we see your maybe your what does this correspond to in terms of your HDD? If you have the forecast contest up or something?
Yes.
I assume it's below normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess yeah. Sorry. So right here are my metrics for entering into the competition. So this is the Pacific side, right? Here's the mountain, the Midwest, South Central, and the East. So if these numbers are below, I type in below. If they're above, I type in above. At the moment, I'm ±2 on average. I think, I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing in regard to if I'm doing it correctly. But so my mean this week is super low. I think compared to what would be average for HDDs. And I think I have a pretty high spread across the nation, but which is lower than the past few forecast periods where I've had standard deviation in the upper 30s. So it could be my method of entering the actual, my actual mean temperature. But so that's how that connects to the HDDs.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, this is looks like do you have the forecast contest board up, or can you pull that up real quick?
Yes, I'll bring that up right now.
And then we can look, but I think you're right. I think there's going to be a good distribution of forecast views here today.
Dave, can I make just a comment?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Or a thought I'd just like to add. Josh, this is great. Thank you for sharing this. One thing that that comes to mind immediately for me, because we've always sort of the HDD data that you're using.
Yes.
Which I believe is coming from NCDC, or
okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably where I got it.
Where you got it. And the data that we are using is from Maxar. So there's always one study I've always wanted to do is to just look at how close those two are, because it is not a national HDD. Is actually, as I'm sure you're aware, not a simple calculation.
No, yes, absolutely.
But adding this element to it, I think would make an even more interesting study, is not just comparing the two data sets, but comparing the impact of using one or the other on your forecast. That's just
absolutely.
a huge project, but something I think would be very, very interesting to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would be interested to see the data that you guys are using versus the stuff that I pulled from there. If it's much different, I don't know.
So yeah, this is probably maybe a good time, if you don't mind, Josh. Is there any other questions for Josh in terms of his forecast? I know it's a lot here. I think it's probably take some folks a little bit of time to digest and stuff, but any particular questions in terms of Josh? Oh, and Josh, I was just, while people are doing that, can you click on performance
yes.
up top? I was just thinking if we can see the board, and then we can compare your forecast to others. And,
oh, right, yeah. So I've been trying to figure out what all these metrics meant, and as I've studied the outcomes of others, I kind of got on to the idea that I was missing the seasonal variance in my numbers, because it's always kind of around the same mean. It's like, hey, this can't be right. Anyway, so you want to see this?
Yeah, go to the weekly. Actually, go to the weekly. Yeah, go down to February 2nd, if you don't mind. And this way, then we can see. This is cool, right? Because then if you sort by mean, there, you can see the distribution of forecast here. So we've got you on the lower end at 112, And then if we go all the way to the upper end, let's see, there we go. Matt Lanza, who's another industry participant. He's at
Right.
155. So this is kind of interesting. I mean, this is
It
why we
is.
do it, though. That's really it's interesting that your methodology there suggests, obviously we're, some of the models here over the next 10, 15 days are suggesting some significant cold weather in some areas there. So if we do indeed see this kind of shift in the 16 to 20, that would be a pretty dramatic change on the market, I think.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
interesting view. Is there? I know we do want to open up for questions, but is there anything else in terms of so big picture? Just I know it sounds like you put a lot of weight on your methods, so it tells me that you feel pretty good about them. But
Well, I mean, I don't think that I'm going out for a win. What I'm doing is just going all in with this to see how it reacts and see how it compares to other methods. It's not,
oh, fair enough.
I'm not going to stand on a stone and say this is the only way to do it. This is just something out there, and I like to see how it performs because I just don't know.
Well, and then
how
what
well
I
it
was going to
performs.
ask is, so you've got your method, and then if you have looked at the dynamic guidance, what are your thoughts? So I know you want to test this process, and absolutely, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to do. Just let it go objectively, and let's see how it does.
Yes, absolutely.
But now, like with your more, I don't know, subjective experiential hat on, when you look at everything, do you look at your numbers and say, yeah, I do think this is probably the best centerline view I can come up with? Or do you say, you know what, if I was going to put a subjective view, I might, I don't know, be warmer, colder, that kind of thing?
Oh, well, I can't really predict the weather. So when I see models and stuff, I kind of like let it play out. But my background with all of this stuff, I like to use just because I like to use, so you see Anthony Lupo down here, correct?
That's right.
Dr. Lupo and I and Joe Rankin collaborated on a contest a while back, and we did a paper together on the Bering Sea rule. I like to stick with that stuff to see if it works and to see if they connect, like for example the Bering Sea rule there, if that would show something similar to the recurring Rosby wave train, then if the dynamic models showed something similar, then the confidence would be all right. I mean, if it's showing something completely different, do I think that our technology of modeling is something wrong? No, I don't think so. I think then the method would be wrong. Objectively speaking, I would have low confidence then. But we have all seen the weather do 180s, so you never know. Am I going to place bets on it? Doubtful.
All right. Well, any questions for Josh and his the forecast process here, the Rossby wave train analog method?
I do like seeing the MJO projections when they're similar to the recurring Rosby wave train stuff, because I think they're based on similar actions of the atmosphere. But
well, if there are no other questions, I'll just jump in with one more thing. Josh, I realize I completely didn't introduce myself to you. I'm a sort of a half academic, half private sector. Got my one foot in each pond, so to speak, working with Dave in the private sector, and I'm a researcher at Rutgers University. And I just wanted to say, so if you're ever interested in exploring or doing any type of study to look at the difference between the HDD data sets, just email me and I'd be happy to talk about it.
Excellent. Appreciate that.
Well, Josh, if you can stay on, that'd be great. I was thinking this could be a good opportunity to open up with some other views and share other forecasts.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, great. Well, again, thank you for sharing that. And I think again, I think over time, it'll probably take a little time to digest that and understand a little bit more over time. But I love the fact that you're sharing your methodologies, and I think it's great to have new views and different processes and stuff, and that's why we do it, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a lot of fun, and I plan on keeping up my participation. So
Excellent. All right, thank you.
learning more. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so let's see, who would like to talk about, I guess let's, we won't follow any particular order today. I think, again, normally we do the attribution and stuff, but obviously I think there's some interesting things going on in the market. I laugh a little bit because so I get an email from Risk Pulse, which is a company in the energy, commodities, and transportation markets and such. And I read their headline today, and it said that I had to read this twice. It said that the day-on-day HDD change in their, I guess, 15-day forecast. So they accrue it and then look, how did today's 15-day forecast compare to yesterday's 15-day forecast? And they said it was plus 40 HDDs. And then they said it was one of their biggest daily changes in the last 10 years. So that's why I kind of chuckled a little bit to say that, I'm sure there's some things going in the market. And with that, I'm thinking we've got Dave Darkangelo also on today's call, which is great. Dave's in the industry and such. And so I was thinking, Dave, if you don't mind, because I don't know when you have to leave, if you could spend a couple minutes talking about your views on the forecast, and also just from a market perspective, like what's going on that you're able to share.
Hey, Dave, can you give me 1 minute and I
Sure.
can jump in on that? Thanks.
Sure.
In the meantime, could I just ask, that does sound large for the 15-day average.
Yeah.
And a change, and what would, maybe you could share with everybody what a typical change would be, and how often. I guess I'm trying to think back, and I should not use my memory to think back on the data. But what would cause, or what has the potential to cause such an enormous change in the 15-day average?
I'm gonna leave that last one for Dave. But no, no, the first one, good question. A daily, I don't have no hard numbers in front of me, but just from experience, if 5, 8, obviously, sometimes it could be as little as 1 or 2 if there's not much going on. But 5-ish, 3 to 8, 4 to 8 is pretty typical. And you're gonna see days every week or two where it's 10 to 15. And then when you start getting it up to like 20, that starts to be like, like once every few months or a month, and then 30 once a year or so, and 40, 40 is massive. Sometimes you'll see stuff like that on a weekend, right? But on a weekend, you've got, it's like the Friday to Monday kind of thing. And just to put some perspective, like this is for some folks who follow the contest often know what I'm looking at here, but this is the from Maxar, who gives us access to their data and stuff. This is looking at the Maxar HDD forecast. We call it the strip, broken down by day. So you can see Feb 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. And then they had the different periods here. And you could see, like this time of year, kind of ballpark what an HDD for a day is, 25, 30, on these really cold days, color coded, 35, 40. And then you could see how that adds up. It's summed up here. So, 147 for days 1 to 5, and then you have 6, 10, 11 to 15. The entire 15-day forecast from Maxar is about 508. So assuming that Risk Pulse, which is a different vendor, but assuming that they were approximately the same, then that, again, they went up about 40. So it would have been like yesterday, they were like 40, 460 or 470. And then today they're 500 or 510 is kind of what happened there. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, we can at least say from our experience in looking at it would be very extraordinary to see that change in an average come out of the model guidance, given that the models do, especially at the extended range, do not tend to reflect the full variability that actually occurs in the atmosphere. So that would lead me to believe, at least as a first hunch, that this has something to do with their particular proprietary forecasting process. Just a thought.
Well, it could, but you beat me to the punch. I was going to show here, and Dave, feel free to jump in whenever you're ready. But the EC ensemble. So you can also see the model changes here.
Okay.
And these model changes are also, these, you know, this is just the raw EC ensemble, and it shows a 12-hour change. These are some big 12-hour
Yeah.
changes. You could see here in this right column. Again, this is where normally I expect, you know, yeah, I mean, every model run, there's going to be variability and volatility, but that was pretty big. And then, I mean, that's the EC ensemble, which, you know, as we know, Lynn, like that model tends to be less volatile. It's a better model, and you know, it doesn't swing back and forth as much. Here's the GFS ensemble, and gosh, I can't imagine. This was yesterday's 12Z. I'm sure Dave had fun with this one, Dave D'Arcangelo. But I mean, these numbers are insane. So it was plus 26 in the 6 to 10 day period alone. It doesn't show you the 11 to 15 because it's missing a day, but you can see these daily numbers. So I mean, something also happened here in the last couple of days, i.e., it seems to me like the models, to your question, the models picked up on something, right? Now, whether it's right or wrong, we'll find out. I mean, it hasn't verified, but the models definitely picked up on something here in the 6 to 15 day period or earlier that triggered this big change in the 6 15 day period. I haven't looked in enough detail today to even propose anything. I guess what's
Could
been
you
on.
jump back to ECMWF again?
Sure.
Yeah, just for a second. Well, the big one seems to be comparing the two, or at least for today, ECMWF is solid positive with large numbers. And if you flip back to GFS, there's some volatility, but it's going in both directions and overall slightly less. So it would be ECMWF is showing probably the larger contributor to that. Okay, I'll let you go. I know you asked a question to Dave, so.
Oh, yeah, Dave, were you ready, or you still need another minute? I'm not sure if he's.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, I'm back. So to go back to answer I think your initial question, I've only been kind of given one ear to this conversation was, yeah, starting late last week, Thursday and Friday, the GFS ensemble started making reasonably significant cold changes, which for the last half decade or so has been a pretty good indicator that it's not going to be cold. The European, even on the 12Z Friday run, was a fairly warm model, and then we started seeing a fairly significant convergence with the European completely capitulating to the GFS over the last 4 days. In fact, it seems to be being led by the GFS, seems to be leading this forecast quite a bit. Now, where we go from here is probably anyone's guess, but yesterday midday, the GFS made a massive model change, the GFS ensemble, with these kind of repetitive cold outbreaks in the 6 to 15 day window. And then the European didn't really see that. And then on the overnight, the next subsequent run, the 0Z last night, the European made a fairly substantial move to kind of catch the GFS again. So I guess I heard you say something about Maxar said it was one of the largest model moves they've seen in 10 years. Is 10 years? Is that right?
Yeah, it was actually wrist pulse, but yeah, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to go back and look. Obviously it's the largest change we've seen, I know, in the last couple of 3 winters, but we've really been lacking cold for the most part since the winter of 14-15. So it's a fairly big move. I think it's a little bit curious that the GFS was leading the European, and the European was forced to completely side with the GFS. And the market response to that was, with the market, which is typically European weighted pretty hard, was forced to move materially higher in the natural gas and electricity markets, to kind of meet those cold forecasts when you came in Monday. And then we saw that next leg higher overnight with the European move on the 0Z. Does that kind of explain what you were asking?
It does, but Lynn brought up the $1 million question, which is, any idea what triggered it over the last few days? Like what got into the models? What did the models pick up on? Why all of a sudden this big, massive move? Any ideas?
No, I mean, I have some speculation as to, why, like, this, I guess, goes back to the, I think I shared this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is, I carry unusually wide distributions of my forecast, partly for this reason, in that, the weather is relatively, the models are always under dispersed. And granted, this was a massive move, but, I feel like most of my spreads are much wider than where everyone else has them. And I feel like I'm even underdone sometimes. We just really feel like there's always this risk on weather 16 to 20 days out that the malls aren't picking up on. And even if you were warm-sided last week, you had to give some credibility to cold risks, knowing that, January was a fairly, even going back to December for that matter, was a fairly persistent negative AO, NAO. And I think there's a few other things. I'm not sure why, like, all of a sudden we kind of clicked and flipped a switch, but, we've had a few things that are changed materially, right? The NAO, NAO has been persistently negative, and not that that's been a change. But we've watched cold in the last 5 weeks go to, the mid latitudes, right? First Asia, and then Europe, and Western Russia. North America hasn't taken its turn yet. And it looks like what has been transpiring over the last 2, maybe 10 days of January is a complete breakdown of the tropical forcing. I know the MJO, like, when you look at the phases, like, it's like phase 6, 7, it hasn't really moved very much from that. But what's happened at, say, if you look at like velocity potential at 200 millibars, what you're going to notice is that you've had this very long-standing convective bursts over Indonesia, going back to late fall. It's really truly a marker of the La Nina pattern, and that has not just broken down, but we've seen kind of the tropical forcing thread out, kind of bleed out to the east across kind of the West Pac. And so while the La Nina is in place, the tropical forcing signature of La Nina is not. And that's a fairly significant change, going into the month of February, which was at least enough of a reason to say, there's some risk to the cold or very cold side. And so we kind of bucket out our forecasts. Even though the mean of our distribution was normal to above, we still had some risk that it was very cold because of some of those tropical forcing changes that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth reiterating the point that Dave had made just a few minutes ago, saying that in this case, in the last few weeks, the GFS has been out ahead of the ECMWF, and the ECMWF has been catching up. I think that's a point worth noting, because I feel it's a very subjective statement to say that ECMWF is just the better model. And I think we tend to, for some reason, ignore these instances when the GFS is being the better model. It's worth looking into that, or at least trying to be more objective about it, I think. And I totally can't answer the question as to what caused this particular giant leap, but I will say one of the key takeaways that we got from a lot of our years of research was that these big jumps are nearly always preceded by the models being far apart and in disagreement. And then we see that gigantic jump happen within a day. So it's not surprising that a giant jump happened right now, but I can't explain the size of it.
That's a good point. It's Lynn, right? I'm sorry,
Yes,
I missed it.
yes.
Yeah, that's a great point about the GFS being, probably so if you look at the scale of GFS, I guess you can use any number of indices. We kind of look at Northern Hemisphere 500 millibars over the last, say, 30 to 60 days, and it's fun to kind of always think you should point and laugh at the GFS, but truth be told, like, the skill of it has been almost indecipherable from the European.
Yep.
On the balance of winter for Northern Hemisphere 500 millibar patterns. There, I guess you're showing it, Dave. I think we look at it from a different standpoint, but that's fairly clear that these are minor. The differences in these models at these skill levels at this range 11 to 15 days, these are minor changes, right? Like, we're looking at, I think this is an anomaly correlation. Probably you're sharing, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're looking at something like 0.1 0.65 versus point whatever 7, it's really not that big of a deal. And it's certainly not a big enough deal to just completely discount the GFS. So to Lynn's point, the GFS, had to have some credibility with its cold forecast. Now, the trap that the market falls into is that, it's a very Euro-sided market. And, repeatedly for the past 5 or 6 winters, these cold looks have tended to fail, almost without exception. So, it was likely imagined that, well, here's another cold failure coming up in Feb. And that was probably the right play based upon, the last 5 years of history, but it clearly wasn't this time.
Or at least it'd be interesting to segregate those cold failures into situations where we have a significant storm and where we don't, because it seems in my probably biased memory, I will say that every time there's a significant snowstorm, at least we haven't had many in the last 2 or 3 years, but we did, if you go back through starting in 2013, 2014, you look through those years, and even 1 or 2 storms in the last couple, when there's precipitation involved, those cold outbreaks tend to be correct.
Yeah, Lynn, that's a great point. That's something I'm glad you brought that up. We've kind of batted that around ourselves with my team, which with regards to once a significant, Eastern North America, Northwest Atlantic storm occurs, once that's not occurs, but once it's in the short term, like inside, call it day 5, the models will tend to be a bit more jumpy. And clearly on Friday, we saw this, we were like within 4 days now of a pretty substantial storm, which we're digging out of. That would be something that we might be interested in looking at from the standpoint of model volatility and, preceding changes, which is going to when these storms get into the short term. But it's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up because we've kind of batted that around ourselves.
I'll throw my 2 cents in too. And then actually, I think Nat Johnson joined us. And so I'm going to put Nat on the spot here in a second since he's a MJO guru. But, again, and I'm playing Monday morning quarterback a little bit, but if I had a week or 2 to do some research of whatever my choosing is, I look at this MJO event, and again, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, and I'm speaking subjectively slash experientially. I mean, we have some qualitative information, obviously, with some of these charts we've done. But looking at this, this just scares me. Like seeing an MJO, this scares me from experience. That is slowly amplifying and moving slowly from 6, 7 this time of year. And then looking at this chart with the SPC lighting up like it's 4th of July. I feel, again, I'm speaking some feel here, and I'd love to test this, but I feel like this is a classic situation where the models underestimate the response, the extratropical Rossby wave response to something like this, and that the skew is significantly to the cold side, beyond, not day 1 or day 2, but, getting into that 6 to 20 day range where there's a rearrangement of the North America pattern. And I feel like this is something that we've seen before and is a systematic problem in the models. Now, last thing, again, we don't have, if I go, this is our chart here, if we're around this time of year, again, the peak cold is almost exactly where we're at right now in terms of our MJO. Now, this is not a change plot, right? This is not looking at necessarily model error or, hey, are the models going to change by 20 HDDs or something like that? This is explicitly just looking at, forecast anomaly and stuff and such. So again, if I had some more research time, I think it'd be great to explore that further to test the hypothesis I just threw out there. But again, that's my 2 cents. I feel like that's the place I would start in terms of seeing if we can find more evidence of this kind of OLR / MJO kind of situation projecting onto model errors in a way that could help at least explain in part some of the things that we've seen over the past couple of days. But Nat, I know you're on the line here. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Do you have any thoughts? I know you jumped in the middle, but we were just talking about how there were some big model changes here to the colder side over the past few days, and such like that. Any thoughts on sort of what's going on here?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say that I'm kind of just getting up to speed, so I'm haven't followed things closely, so I'm hopefully just getting started to get back to getting a handle on what's going on. But yeah, I mean, certainly I think what you pointed out jumps out at me is that that big jump to MJO phases 6 and 7, and how that potentially can yeah, that could be a big player. And one thing that I guess kind of, just contrasting this winter with last winter. I remember last winter, it just seemed like even when we had the tropics, the signal from the tropics looked favorable for cold. It just seemed like like the strong polar vortex, the positive AO, NAO, just that whatever was going on, that signal just seemed to dominate, and like we did not see the typical tropical signals that we would have expected. But this winter, it's very different. Of course, we just had the sun stratospheric warming, the North Atlantic, and the Arctic signals are very different. So it makes me wonder. We have these competing, these interacting factors. Yeah, I'd say it seems like this winter has a different, much different character than last winter, and I think potentially that MJO signal interacting with what else has been going on, that could be a big factor.
But it's funny we're talking about these changes too. I can't remember. It might have been Dave. It might have been you who I was just talking to like a week or two ago, and saying how boring this winter's been. Like how we haven't seen a lot of extreme weather, whether it be like really cold or really warm. Dave, was it you? Was what we were talking?
Yeah, that was me. I actually think I said it a week ago today.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I mean,
Yeah.
Mother Nature loves to give you the bird, I guess.
Yeah,
Right?
and I was kind of saying it in jest too, right? Like it's always when you thumb your nose at the pattern, it completely. So yeah, that the stratospheric warming thing is interesting, and I'm going to just jump in on that real quick. There's not a lot of great correlations to North American weather and southern stratospheric warming events. I think we tried that like 20 years ago, and it worked once, and we kind of jumped on it. It hasn't worked since. But in fun, there's some evidence to suggest that in a sudden stratospheric warming event and in a polar vortex split, that the best weather, the best opportunities for North American pattern changes actually occur 30 to 40 days following the event, usually long past people's attention span. And we're basically about that point right now. The peak of the split of the warming occurred around, I want to say January 5th.
Yeah.
So, we're coming up on that 30-day window. And when you kind of combine all these things, right, the MJO move, and we look at it from tropics a little bit differently than just a phase 6, 7, but the MJO, the stratospheric warming, the persistent AO negative, the negative AO, NAO, and then back to Lynn's point about the storm in the very short term, right? I mean, there was, plenty of evidence to suggest that this was a possibility. But we've cried wolf so many times on cold events the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years, whatever, that it gets a little dull.
I think that's such a good point too. You bring up, Dave, about the stratospheric relationship, because that's all the research. That's what I've seen too in the research. All of Mark Baldwin's and stuff like that. It was always, even comparing it to like ENSO in the sense that it was really like a multi-week, and some cases a 1 to 2 month kind of response. But it seems like we're so everything's about what happens tomorrow, and it's like, oh well, if we don't see that response next week, then I guess it's not really there. But I think it's interesting to see, like, how much of this could also be related to some of the things that happened earlier in January that are just now, having that sort of impact on the pattern. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah. And the one thing that I don't really understand well is that connection between stratospheric warming events potentially then seeing a response in the tropics, and
Yeah.
or is it somehow vice versa? Are we not looking at that correctly? Right. There's an interesting point to be made about this winter, which is the complete breakdown of the La Nina forcing at the end of January, and what preceded that, or what precipitated that kind of that flip, so to speak, will be maybe interesting to kind of look into. Or I haven't really had a chance to kind of examine that other than observe that it looked like it was going to happen. But what was the root cause of that is an unknown thing.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was looking at we did like a spatial correlation kind of thing just for fun of looking at this La Nina versus some other La Ninas. If I have it up, I'll pull it up real quick. Yeah, here it is. Here, I'll share my screen just to show this real quick. This is from a few days ago, but I was looking at from December 1st to mid to late January, looking at the spatial correlation with this La Nina versus say other moderate to strong La Ninas, and the 500 millbar pattern was really like non-existent, like point here, the minus 0.04. And not every year is high, right? Not every year is perfect as you would expect, right? But there's a number of years here that 2010 0.6, 0.2, 0.4, 0.46, 0.58, 0.6. But looking at this pattern, this was kind of this is what December 1st to January 15th in terms of the jet stream pattern, and then this was the composite with those analog years. This sort of in sample, I included this current year, but you can see how different across the North Pacific that we've been versus what you might expect, or was a composite of some of those previous years. So, all right, I know we're just about out of time. Anything else before we call it today? Any final words? Nat, how much snow did you get?
I think about a foot.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
How about you?
15 to 20. And Lynn, you said over 2 feet?
Lynn had to leave.
Oh, Lynn had to leave. Okay. I think Lynn was the big breadwinner. I think she had over 2 feet.
Yeah, I guess that band kind of set up just kind of north of us.
Yep.
And I guess she was in the sweet spot.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, Northwest New Jersey, as is usually the case, right? Sussex County, Warren County, Morristown.
Tell me about it.
I know. I used to take when I was just about your age, Mike, or a little bit younger. I used to take sometimes after school drive up to High Point, New Jersey, just to see snow. But, all right, and we could leave it on that note before I embarrass myself anymore. Thanks, Dave and Nat, and earlier Josh. Thanks for participating. I think it was a really interesting forecast here and situation. So hopefully we'll see some of you guys next week.
Sounds good.
All right, take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.